Welcome back to this week's video. Today I'm gonna walk you guys through some of the classes that I've been at in school. I had a plant dyeing workshop this week, which I was really excited about, but there was a tiny bit of a controversy in it, which I will touch on in this video. What I'm very excited about is showing you guys the rest of my silver working class. I have some of the results on me right now. I'm actually working on more cast sculptures to make more, so we'll have yet another silver section in a future video. But yeah, enjoy the video. So, in case you didn't see my last video, I've been taking an amazing metalwork class where I've been carving my items out of wax, which I've never done before, and then casting them in silver, which I have also never done before. For this method, I wasn't able to make molds, so all of my wax carvings were one of one. There was a lot of trial and error. I cut my thumb like twice and burnt myself with hot wax, but it was so worth it to see them finally in the silver. So today I finally got to see the castings and clean them up. I made 3 rings. One was my Sphinx, my signet ring, and a little horse inspired by old wood carved toys. And I also made some charms like this little cross one, another sphinx for a necklace, and then a tiny apple one just for fun. My teacher gave us so many demonstrations. I love her so much. She's so funny and informative. I have learned all of this from scratch, and she's been very, very patient with me.
Or the structure of the of the circle.
I finally got to try everything on and it fit so well and I was so happy. The final step was just polishing them. First it was with steel wool and then I used this little electric brush thingy to get into all the cracks and crevices. As you can see, they're becoming oh so beautiful and shiny. At times, I went back in with the curved file like I did with the wax, and any silver dust and bits that came off I saved to maybe melt down and use again in the future. It was about 3 hours of sanding and polishing all the bits. And then finally, we had our little photo shoot. I just replaced the gemstone that was on my necklace before with the Sphinx, and it's so beautiful. And I've got my rings on. I could not be a happier girl with how these came out. I showed this clip in the last video. If so, you got a little spoiler, but I am so happy with how these came out. I will literally never take these off because they're pure silver, so I can just shower with them, and I'm in love. I love it. The weather has been so up and down. Sometimes we had these beautiful sunny days with this like cherry blossom rainstorm, and then I got an actual rainstorm the next day for my plant dyeing class. Neta como que parece que casi podría estar en Japón. O es mi imaginación. Today is the first day of a plant dyeing workshop. I'm very excited. I don't think I've ever learned like professionally how to dye with plants. I'm going to a new building I haven't been to before. This is a beautiful area. And yeah, we'll see how it goes.
Mordants are actually a fiber. It's not that big, it's not that long. Want to kind of have a look. I twisted them once more and I put this little string on.
The dye workshop was very informative. It smelled like lanolin and fresh cut flowers. The lanolin was because the wool was literally like fresh right off the sheep. It was also incredibly nice and warm in there due to the boiling dye pots. We got the chance to experiment with spinning yarn from the wool. We saw the different stages from the pelt covered in like greasy little lanolin to the more processed roving for spinning. I haven't spun wool in maybe over 2 years, so this was a nice refresher and it made me want to pick it back up again when I get back home. I need to cut my bangs. We got another incredibly rainy day out of nowhere, and again, I still have not bought an umbrella, so I had to run from the station to class. Here's some of my notes. Today was a more hands-on dyeing day. We dyed some silk scrap fabric that she had, and also some more wool. There were other little pots with more concentrated dye, which was used for ink, and we were encouraged to play around with the pH, and this was so fun. Here is some cabbage dye that I added some vinegar to, and it turns pink. This was so fun to experiment with. And basically, we just spent the rest of the class experimenting with that. It was pretty fun, I will admit. It was like playing with a bunch of watercolors, and it was very fun to do all the little swatches and experimentations with the pH. But there was a little something that I wasn't too happy about that I'm gonna rant about in the next clip. So if you don't want to hear a rant or anything negative, just skip to the next timestamp. There was a little bit of beef there was a little beef in the sustainable plant dyeing yarn workshop. Our teacher, she comes in, she introduces herself, she says, "Hi, I'm very passionate about slow fashion. I'm passionate about natural dyes, working with plants, making things as sustainable as possible." And I was like, yes, yes. She's like, "Yeah, we need to make, fewer things. Trends cycle so quickly. It just creates so much waste." And I was like, yes, yes. I love this. This is right up my alley. She printed out a little presentation. She puts them on the ground for us to look at the pages. First one is about waste for yarn and wool. Apparently 80% of wool that is produced in Germany by the sheep ends up being burnt. To illustrate this in the presentation that she's giving, she generates an AI image of a pile of wool burning. Can you hear my neighbor's baby crying? It's crying because I'm talking about the use of AI. Then the second picture is of dye runoff in water. The picture that she shows us for the dye polluting the water is AI generated. Maybe I'm just gonna ask her about it, Maybe she doesn't know. Maybe she didn't know that she doesn't know it's harmful. At one point, she's sort of off to a corner by the big pile of wool. And I'm like, go look at the wool. And I'm like, "Hey." And she's like, "Hey." And I was like, "I was wondering, I saw your presentation, very informative, very educational. But I was wondering, I saw these two images said that they were AI generated. Are you aware of the impact that AI has on the environment?" And she's like next to me, and she's still like rummaging through the yarn, and she's like, "Yeah, I am aware of it, yeah, but I wanted to do it anyway because I didn't have to take out my camera and do this copper dye in a petri dish, and then I had to take a picture of it." Someone calls over to her, and she's like, "I'm gonna go, bye." That wasn't a great response. "Oh, I used AI because I didn't want to grab a petri dish and put dye in it and take a photo of it." Okay, you didn't have to. You can go on Google and look at a photograph and use that for your presentation. At the end of the class, we're all seated in a circle. She asks, "Yeah, I would love some feedback and critique in regards to my teaching." No one says anything in response to the "yeah, say something." So I'm the first one. I started off, I did a little sandwich, I really enjoyed learning about this. It was a great 2 days, but I was a little bit confused as to why you used AI to generate these two images, especially when talking about sustainability. And I just thought it was a little bit ironic that you're talking about the wasteful impacts of burning wool, and yet you used AI to generate an image of burning wool. And you know what she says? "Yeah, actually, it was meant to be ironic. I was going for irony there, and that's why I generated the images." I said to her, "As an artist, from one artist to another, I would much rather see you draw a pile of wool burning. I would much rather see your artistic interpretation," because she does do drawings as well. Like, I'm not sure if it's worth actually harming the environment and partaking in something that harms the environment when you're talking about sustainability. And she's like, okay, I'll keep that with me for the future. She's not keeping that with her for the future. And then that was the end of the class. Anyway, that was a lot. And that concludes the rant. Thank you for listening. If you skipped it, I totally understand. It's some art school BS. Anyway, moving on. Look at this cool clip I got of my hot chocolate tea. And it's not AI. Anyway, let's move on. Today, my roommates and I wanted to go see the Bas Jan Ader exhibit at the Kunsthalle, which is a nearby art museum. A lot of museums in Germany and France, surprisingly, are free to art students, which I adore. This was one of them, and it was a beautiful change compared to the incredibly expensive and not free museums that were in Denmark. I'd never gone into John Ader's artwork in depth, so I was pleasantly surprised to see that he also painted and illustrated. One of my favorite pieces was this photo series called The Tea Party. I truly wish that we had the video footage of this, but apparently he never wanted it to be released. It was a very moving exhibit, especially because at the end they showed some of his last letters he sent before he was declared lost at sea and never seen again. I love being motivated by artwork. I love seeing other people be motivated by artwork. I was inspired to paint this apple, and that is just one of the many paintings that I've made while I've been here. And I feel like it's because of all of the museums that I've been to, all of the local art student gallery openings. It's just so beautiful to see this community. And I love the passion that these people have for art. I love when people express themselves, which is why I got so bummed out by my art teacher using AI. And that's finally the last that I'll say on it. Anyway, I went to the library once again. During this week, I finished reading The Militant Muse by Whitney Chadwick, and it was incredible. I could not recommend it more. And while I was in there, there was this little ladybug on one of the books. And I just thought it was so cute that she just popped in on there. It's because our library has a bunch of open windows, and I love that. We're turning the light on. If you made it to the end, leave a comment that says, "Ladybugs love libraries." I've been seeing a lot of ladybugs lately for some reason. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.